Hey internet, my name is the Nobody and welcome to some Ask Reddit, episode 2, TTS edition. Now let's get right into the video.
Deaf community of Reddit, what are the stereotypical alcohol-induced communication errors when signing with a drunk person? After a few drinks my deaf colleagues sometimes sign to other deaf people speaking in sign language. Sorry, can't hear you. Hearing child of deaf parents and deaf siblings here. In high school, I once came home from a party intoxicated and trying to act as sober as I could. I walked into my house hoping everyone was asleep, but of course my dad stayed up for me. I was signing to my dad after he asked how my night was, and it was like 10 pounds weights tied to my wrists. Oh, and I dropped my phone that was in my hand. Safe to say I was grounded for the next weekend. I was at my local bar one night and a rather large group of deaf folks came in. It was a pretty slow night other than this group, and it was absolutely fascinating to see. These two gentlemen got into an argument, and it was so interesting to see them so heated at each other yet completely silent other than their aggressive signing. It didn't escalate much more than shouting via signing. But it was definitely one of the most interesting nights at the bar. My mom would always get jiggly and have a hard time getting through a story clearly. Kind of like when hearing people are laughing and it's hard for them to get to their point. Also just general sloppiness lol. Signs bleed into each other and you have to repeat what you're signing more. I'm hearing, but I went to written it for a couple of years a long time ago. Had a friend who would stutter. He would stutter in his signing at the same points that he would stutter vocally. It was more pronounced when he was drunk. Slurring was real too. People's hands would barely move. I'm not deaf, but I feel it necessary to share simply for the humor. A family I knew back in the late 70s had twin brothers that were deaf and mute. Apparently neither could read lips either. However, they were both good looking kids about 19 years old. Also great athletes. Skiing and soccer were their games. We were in a bar one night near a ski resort in western New York. The place was packed. Two snowbunners came in and tried to talk to them, but quickly learned communication was going to be an issue. I knew hardly any sign, and I had no idea where their brother was. He was not deaf or mute. I explained to the girls and they went to sit at a table. So one of the twins came over to me shrugging his shoulders and pointing at the girls. I gave him a napkin and a pencil. They write on the napkin and walk over to the table where the girls were sitting. They read what was on the napkin, laughed, finished their drinks and all four of them walked out of the bar. They left the napkin on the table, so I went over and looked at it. It said, "Hello, we are Mitch and Cassie and want to know if you want to F." I was dying laughing. I learned sign language at one college and eventually transferred to another school. There was one deaf kid in the program and there was an interpreter in all his classes too. Well, interpret for him. I would eavesdrop quite often in a couple of classes. In one marketing class, the interpreter was telling the deaf student about his night out the previous evening and how drunk he got and started describing the girl he met and what he did when they got home. The deaf student I think accidentally vocalized, or the teacher looked at him and his expression didn't fit the material or something, but the teacher started asking questions. As I remember it was 25 years ago, the interpreter got them out of trouble. But it was one of the funniest exchanges I'd ever seen. There's actually stories of how signs can change over time, based on new ones made up so other people don't know what you're talking about. That is, make out of the kissing kind would be signed by placing your dominant hand's fist over the others and rotating in opposite ways, like you're grinding something. But in school, some kids agreed to change it to an open 5-hand shape in front of the face, palm in, and rotating anti-clockwise. Thus, teachers would know they were talking about who they were making out with. Also, with menstruation, because girls didn't want just anyone to know when it was that time of the month. Instead of actually using the sign in a hand shape tapped against the jawline, they would stick their tongue in their cheek. to press the skin out a little, and their friends knew what they meant. Hopefully that makes sense. Edit just to clarify, yes, you can use tongue-in-cheek to simulate a blowjob, but the movements are subtly different. Blowjob is repetitious, and in the same spot for the middle area of the cheek usually. For menstruation or the secret version of it, it's replacing the act of using your hand for the original sign. So it almost looks like you're cleaning something from the outside of your lower teeth, and only once. Sometimes. Secret keeping and hiding things is frowned in the deaf community because communication among us and most of the world is so hard sometimes. Source: I'm a deaf woman. My sister is HOH with degenerative hearing and will eventually be completely deaf, but when she's drunk she will switch between verbally speaking and signing. It's hilarious when she's around people other than her husband/our family and they don't sign, because she'll get increasingly frustrated when people can't keep up with the signing and verbal words until she remembers most people don't sign. Then she flushes all the way up to her ears and immediately drunkenly stumbles away from the social situation. I wasn't drunk for this, but when I met my girlfriend I hadn't practiced signing in about 4 or 5 years, despite being fluent before that. Early on in the relationship, I was trying to call her perfect, but I accidentally used the sign for France. You are France. A year later, we still describe each other as France when we are flirting in texts, voiced English, and sign. There's a pretty large deaf community around Gallaudet University, which is also near some popular dance clubs and bars in DC. Can't tell if they have translation issues once drunk, but they have the upper hand at communicating on a loud dancer floor. My brother is deaf. We are both in our 50s now. When we were both still at high school, I went to the deaf club Halloween disco with him and his mates. I took a hearing friend with me. The two of us were totally freaked out all night. We were the only hearing people in a disco full of deaf people who were boogieing away without hearing the music. The bass was strong, and they were all signing away all the time whilst dancing. No shouting to be heard over the music. Every time one song stopped, and before the next one started, total silence. A room full of people talking to each other. In complete silence. Me and my mate ended up whispering to each other, because if we spoke it felt like everybody would hear us. It was a mad good night though. So, I'm not deaf, and I already posted this as a response to another comment, but I thought this would add to the overall conversation. My cousin is deaf, and he says hearing people sign better when we are drunk. When we are sober, we try too hard to make all of our signs perfect. That makes us sign slowly, which can be frustrating for them to keep up with. When we are drunk, we don't care, so we sign fast. We make more mistakes, but he almost always knows what we mean. Sorry. I'm on phone, bear with me. Not deaf. My uncle was dating a deaf woman at the time in 2005, and they got drunk one night before New Year's Eve and they were having a great time, and it quickly became 1 AM. Then some random thing came up from not too long ago, car carpet issues with smoking some together thing I can't remember. They were having a fight which went on for around 30 minutes. All of a sudden, uncle blurts out, "Okay, that's enough, I'm done." She became more pissed off and was signing that she was not done. He told me about it later, but he was going, "But I am," and then he turned off the lights. I'm not deaf, but I took ASL in college. When I got to my second year of ASL we had to go to deaf immersion events to sign with deaf people to learn about the deaf culture. One of these events was at a bar. I have had a few drinks and I signing away with some deaf people I made friends with in the past. I'm killing it in my sign lane, finger spelling like a champ, and sighing just as fast as anyone there. We are having a great time telling jokes and drinking when this amazingly hot woman comes up to our group. She was about my age, in her early 20s was my guess. She signs, "Hello, my name is Ashley, it's nice to meet you." I signed back, "Hello, my name is Madaville Fish, it's nice to meet you." I see everyone's eyes get as big as dinner plates. and this look of absolute horror crosses her face. She turns around and leaves. Turns out I didn't say hello. My name is Madeville Fish, it's nice to meet you. I said, hello, my name is Madeville Fish, it's nice to F you. The sign for meet and F is a difference of a finger. Edit after 8 years on Reddit I have finally been given my first gold and silver. I truly feel I have accomplished something here today. Thank you, you kind people. One of my best friends from high school was deaf, but had very limited hearing while using aids. He didn't sign, and was pretty solid with speaking, would read lips to communicate. He told me he was kind of shunned by the deaf community for this, which is a separate, but really sad thing. I was there for his first time drinking. We were 18, and at a wealthy classmate's house. Her dad was a former NFL player. What ensued was one of the most ridiculous nights of communication ever. Since he was drunk, he had trouble seeing straight, and had the spins. I tried to ask him, deaf friend's name, are you okay? He read it as deaf friend's name, are you gay? He then proceeded to tell every girl at the party, very loudly and incoherently, how he definitely wasn't gay and liked girls, and was willing to prove he isn't with any girl who would give him a shot. Cut to an hour later, he is throwing up in the toilet, while half sobbing and yelling, I'm not gay, I'm deaf, you buttholes. At one point that night he punched me in the balls in anger for thinking I thought he was gay, and then when I told him, that seems like kind of a gay thing to do, well, let's just say he went back to drinking even more, which resulted in more incoherent ranting and yelling about not being gay. It wasn't until the next day that I realized my question prompted him to go on a tirade. I still feel bad about it to this day. One of the best kids I ever met, really felt bad that his life probably had many moments like that where a word was taken in the wrong context, and if he wasn't bold enough to confront it, was probably trapped thinking someone said or thought something ill or negative about him. I hope you are doing well, my friend. I'm sorry I accidentally made you address your sexuality to a group of 18-year-old drunk high school students. My in-laws are hearing impaired. In-laws are from Taiwan. In-laws sign a mixture of Chinese and Taiwanese sign. In-laws moved to the US 30 plus years ago and learned ASL. Father-in-law decided to teach me his version of sign, a mixture of all 3 languages. Since the family is the only people I sign to, it's the only sign I know. Now to answer your question, it's a lot easier to sign to the Wi-Fi in certain venues. Bars, clubs, over long distances. Wi-Fi was holding our seats, and we were signing back and forth, while I tried to make my way to the bar to get a few drinks. I could tell that a few people who knew sign were looking at our conversation, and wondering what in the hell we were saying to each other. I'm sure some figured out that it was a foreign language, but I could tell a few were captivated. Thinking I would get a few laughs, I told the Wi-Fi that I had to use the restroom. Specifically, I have to poop. And that's when they lost it. As it turns out, the Chinese/Taiwanese sign for poop is the same as the ASL sign for giving birth. Pretty much translates. Made some good friends that night, and they agreed to start using the sign for birth for number 2. Not deaf, but took ASL for 4 years, and became very close with many who are deaf/hard of hearing. One thing that is hard to adapt to is the speed of signing once everyone has had a drink. All of a sudden everyone is signing at the equivalent speed of an auctioneer. Sometimes when that happened I would simply leave the party because trying to stay in a conversation was impossible. In time it became easier to understand. My old professor told me, it's like reading. When you are learning you only see the letters, DOG, then over time you see dog. At some point you won't just see words, you'll see sentences and paragraphs and then stories. That's what sign language truly is, the language of stories. I loved learning sign language, and that professor was amazing. The smart doggo says hello to you. Subscribe to my Tinder, follow my Discord, and like my Gmail to get the smarts and good grades. PS actually out of likes and subs would be amazing, and keep you up to date on more videos if you use the bell.